Namo Narayan, Devatma.
Namo Narayan, Amalila. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you for being here. And yeah, you're Devatma from Tripura Yoga. Yeah, the other interview we talked about the Mandukya Upanishad and the Aum. And this time I want to talk with you about Kundalini Sadhana. You will give also a workshop about this on the 26th of February. And I really just like to start with a presentation about Shiva and Shakti.
Shiva and Shakti.
Yeah. And can you tell me what Shiva and Shakti has to do with Kundalini yoga?
Yeah. Well, these are two components that can be found in almost every spiritual system. The idea of Shiva and Shakti, as well as the idea of Kundalini. This is really very universal, and we can look and we can see these elements in just about every single religion and spiritual system, from the Abrahamic religions all the way to the shamanic traditions of native peoples. We can see these same ideas being presented of heaven and earth, of day and night, of spirit and matter, of positive and negative, man and woman, moon and sun, God and devil. These ideas are there presented to us throughout all these different traditions. Duality, basically. We can understand that on this level of physical existence, on this dimension, the physical dimension, we experience duality. And these dualities are not only external, but they're internal as well. So the external dualities, we can see, for example, I was just listing them, we can see in man and woman that these polarities exist in nature all around us. It's not just in human beings. There is a male and a female form of every different animal, and even plants have their male and female counterparts. And so this is on the level of duality. However, that's the physical, the external. When it comes to the internal, this idea is described as, basically, it is the separation that we experience out of ignorance, out of a delusion, because we don't know who we are. So we experience ourselves as being separate and different, right? That is the ego state. That is the ego state that is really creating your experience of duality. It's because we don't know that we are spirit, which is the same in all and unifies everything. But because we don't know that, we think that I am an individual, I'm a me and you're a you, and I need to take care of myself and you need to worry about yourself, and we are separate, sometimes even compete or fight against each other. So there's this internal separation. And actually, all desire at its root is concerned with reuniting that separation. So the idea of Shiva and Shakti is that we have this internal separation, right? So there is the body, mind, ego complex, which is Shakti. And then there's the Atman, the spirit, which is Shiva. And so the spiritual process, this whole spiritual process, is about bridging the gap. It's about bringing reunion, where Shakti reunites you with Shiva. And this is this is one of the most core basic elements of Tantra. Tantra is telling us that you don't have to do war between your body and your spirit. We don't have to separate spiritual life from material life. The world is not evil. Matter is not good or bad. The external, the body and the mind, is a projection of the internal. It is the gross form of the Atman and the soul. And so Tantra urges us to reunite, to achieve this union. And it is by Shakti reunites us with Shiva. And internally, there's a total metamorphosis in our identity. We go from identifying with being the external, the name and the form, to identifying with being the internal, to being the indwelling soul, the Atman, to being spirit. Instead of thinking of yourself as being this human being with a mortal life and just a body, mind, and an ego, you are actually a spirit having a human experience. And so this idea of Shiva and Shakti, of not only the dualities of nature, but also within yourself. We have a body and a mind, the manifest, and we also have a soul, a spirit, an Atman, the unmanifest. And the unmanifest is actually the true you. And the manifest, the Shakti, is subject to change. And however, it is Shakti that leads you back to Shiva. Because without Shakti, without the body, without the mind, without the ego, you cannot perceive the Atman. The Atman is universal, but it needs a vehicle of some sort, and that's what Shakti is. Shakti is a vehicle for Shiva to come into the world and to experience itself as an individual being, and Shakti is also the vehicle for returning you back to Shiva. And that is exactly what Kundalini is. So to answer your question, what Shiva and Shakti and Kundalini. Kundalini is that aspect of Shakti that reunites you with Shiva, brings you back to your spiritual, your eternal spiritual truth as a spiritual being inhabiting a mortal body, an immortal self inhabiting a mortal shell, a mortal vehicle of the physical body. So that is Shiva, Shakti, and Kundalini, bringing them together.
Thank you. Yeah, great explained. And when you go to the first slide, can you tell a bit about the Shiva Lingam? What you here see on the picture, they made it in the sand with Shiva and the snake. And when you go full screen, can you tell a bit about Shiva Lingam?
Sure. So the Shiva Linga is one of the most ancient symbols of Tantra. And we can enjoy understanding a little bit about the symbolism here. So we just understood the difference between Shiva and Shakti. The manifest is Shakti, and the unmanifest is Shiva. The dynamic is Shakti, and the static is Shiva. Shiva is spirit, and Shakti is the manifest world of energy and matter, the play of energy and matter. And so how do we represent these two, Shiva and Shakti? Well, we have the linga and we have the yoni. And the linga is symbolic of consciousness, because what is the linga? If you look at the linga, it is a spherical stone. It is perfectly spherical. And this sphere, the round nature of it, represents the zeroth dimension of non-duality. It represents non-duality because a round object, doesn't have any sides to it, so it doesn't have any dimensions to it, right? It's all just one dimension. It's all one side, basically. So in this sense, it represents that non-dual dimension of pure consciousness, the pure experience, the inner, the non-manifest. And you can feel this, it creates a certain aura, a certain energy field when you're in the presence with a Shiva Linga, even a small Shiva Linga. You can feel this power that is emanating from the Shiva Linga. Because it's not only representing, it's not only an idea, but it's a universal principle. And so it allows us to be able to focus our devotion to the Shiva Tattva, to the Purusha, to spirit. It allows us to be able to focus that devotion on one place, then is also having an energy field that corresponds to that pure consciousness as well. And then every time you worship the Shiva Linga, the energy becomes stronger through your own devotion, through your own puja, through your own sadhana. You can amplify that Shiva energy and it becomes quite palpable. And, you know, if you have a Shiva Linga, you should keep it in its own room and live very mindfully around a Shiva Linga. You know, you want to, it is actually a representation of the divine in physical form. And when you're in the presence of a Shiva Linga, you should behave as if you're in the presence of Bhagavan, as if you're in the presence of God. And in this way, also the energy can increase and be nourished and amplified as well. And that energy of Shiva is Shakti.
Yes. They're one, huh?
Yes, exactly. Right. Like you can't have light without heat. Like you cannot have sound without vibration. Right? They come together.
Yeah. And when you go to the next slide, you see Tantra and Yoga. And what is actually the difference between Tantra and Yoga? And what is Kundalini for kind of practice?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I really like that question because I think that what the world is really seeking today is Tantra. And yoga has given us so much. And I think yoga will always have its place and will always have so much to be able to give to each person. But I think that when it comes to more of the philosophies and more of the lifestyle components and the way of thinking and interacting with the world, I think that the world is actually more interested in Tantra. And one of the differences we can see between the two is yoga. If we look at the roots and the history of yoga, it's an ascetic path. It is an ascetic path, meaning yoga, it was traditionally a path for those who are renunciates. They've renounced the world. They've renounced society. They don't want a husband or wife. They don't want kids. They don't want a career. They don't want desires, period. They want to make union their only desire. So it's more of a path for people who are very disillusioned with the world. In its essence, of course, you can do yoga without being a renunciate. But that's where I think then people are they're seeking more for Tantra. Because Tantra is traditionally, of course, there's so many different branches and so many different, there's left-hand path and right-hand path. But just to simplify things for this discussion, we can understand Tantra as being more for the householder, as being more for people who are enmeshed in the world and they're burning their karmas through the world And the world is their path to salvation, to righteousness, and to your higher destiny. So not everybody can become a monk, even if you could, even if you didn't have a family or kids or responsibilities. Very, very, very few people are actually attracted to that lifestyle. Even a lot of people who are doing yoga and who love yoga and who love to meditate. Really, what most people I see doing yoga, what they want is they want to integrate all these different parts of their life into spiritual life. They want to spiritualize their sex life. They want to enrich their sensual experiences. They want to have a more spiritual encounter with life. They don't want to separate out the two. They don't want to divorce the world from spirit. And so Tantra is perfect because that's exactly what Shakti Tantra in specific, what it really encourages you to do is to integrate all these different aspects of your life into spirituality and bring spirituality into every facet and every component of your life, into your diet, when you wake, when you shower, all these things. This is all, everything is a divine interaction. And we have the experience, we have the opportunity to experience the divine in ourselves and in each other all the time, not just during ritual, not just during meditation, but through higher awareness. Even the slightest interaction, even just greeting a stranger or looking somebody in the eye with total intimacy, that can be a spiritual experience. And that's the attitude that Tantra encourages. And we can look at it as, being yoga for renunciates and Tantra for householders. That has its limitations, but just to have a departure kind of perspective or an understanding, a beginner's understanding. But it's also, especially if we look at Hatha Yoga versus Shakti Tantra, we can see there's a difference in a totally different approach. Both of them are dealing ultimately with the Kundalini. All forms of yoga are either directly or indirectly associated with Kundalini, with awakening Kundalini. Because until and unless Kundalini awakens, our spiritual life is mostly intellectual. But after Kundalini awakens, then spiritual life begins. That is true spiritual rebirth. To be born again really means that your Kundalini has awakened. And when Kundalini awakens, then you start to have all sorts of spiritual and psychic experiences. For example, when you see visions or lights or you hear things, those are psychic experiences. And they can be profound. You can have visions of gods and goddesses. And you can have all sorts of premonitions of the future. But that's all on the psychic level. Beyond that is spiritual experiences. But on the spiritual dimension, there's no duality. So it's just an experience of oneness. It's just an experience of bliss, of joy, of love. It's an experience of oneness beyond duality. So we can differentiate between spiritual experiences and psychic experiences. Most of the experiences we have during meditation are psychic experiences, actually. Even when we see lights, we hear beautiful sounds, we have these visions. But when you are experiencing just pure bliss during meditation, that experience of oneness beyond the mind, beyond all mental phenomenon, that's the spiritual experience. And so all these different forms of yoga, not only yoga, Tantra, Vedanta, not only Hindu Dharma, but all the different spiritual traditions of the world are either directly or indirectly utilizing the Kundalini. Shri Kundalini Shakti. For example, in Christianity, it is the Holy Spirit. And when John the Baptist baptizes Jesus, there is the white dove that descends down. This is all symbolic of a Kundalini awakening, of Shaktipat. John the Baptist gave Jesus Shaktipat. He initiated him. He activated his Kundalini. And so we can see this, in Judaism, it's called Shekinah. Same idea that there's this spark of divinity that is one with God in the non-dual dimension, and it creates our whole experience of individuality, of having a body and a mind. And that creative spark then stays with us after the body and the mind have been created. It stays with you as your creative divine spark, and it leads you back to God as well. And it's a feminine energy in Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism as well, the Shekinah. And it's also described as being a feminine energy in the Hindu Tantra as well. The Kundalini Shakti is seen as being a goddess. And that perspective is one of maybe the biggest things that differentiates yogic approach of Kundalini versus tantric approach of Kundalini. Because in tantric approach to Kundalini, she is treated as a goddess. She is deified. She is personified as an aspect of the divine. She is the divine mother. And therefore she guides your sadhana. And ultimately you are to surrender to her. Whereas the yogic approach to Kundalini, especially the Hatha yoga approach to Kundalini, is more than it's an impersonal force. Like a force in nature that's dormant at the bottom of your spine, and you need to do all these exercises and these practices to awaken it and then guide it. And you're doing all the work consciously and willfully. So it's the path of will versus the path of surrender. So you could also look at it as a masculine approach versus a feminine approach, where yoga is really more the masculine approach of willpower. And I am going to achieve this. I am going to direct the Kundalini through all these different bandhas, through all these mudras, through all these asanas, through all these pranayams. Whereas the tantric approach, the feminine approach, is more about surrender. Where instead of seeing Kundalini as just being like an energy, you see it as being an intelligence. It's an intelligent force. It's your own inner goddess. And it's more about learning to surrender to her and learning how to be able to intuitively receive wisdom from her in what should be your next sadhana, what should be your next spiritual practice, spiritual discipline in your path. And you can receive all of that knowledge intuitively from within. And the tools usually for Tantra would be sacred sound and sacred geometry. The tools for Tantra are mantra, yantra, and mandala. And these are the tools of ritual. And that's another thing that differentiates the two. Yoga leads us more towards meditation. And through meditation, you experience the chakras and you have an inner experience. Whereas Tantra is really a lot more about ritual, ceremony. So you have your mantra that you're going to chant, and you have the visual representation of the mantra, which is called a yantra. And then you have something that's going to contain the energy that you're building up, which is the mandala. So a mandala in Western magic, we have what's called the magic circle. Like for people who may have studied Wicca, right? Mm-hmm. The magic circle is the circle you draw around you, and it contains the energy that you're building up. This same idea is in Tantra in the idea of a mandala. So when you see the big, they make these beautiful mandalas out of rice powder, colored rice powder. Just beautiful, bright colors, and this is a mandala. And it's taking them hours and hours. If you see sometimes in the monasteries, they're creating these mandalas that take days. That's containing the energy. They're chanting mantras and they're focusing on this yantra while they're creating the mandala. So this whole ritual, the ceremony is being contained by the mandala. Your mandala can also just be a photo on your puja, on your altar, and you're focusing all of your devotion on this photo while you're chanting your mantra. Or it could be a crystal, or a Sri Chakra, or a Shiva Linga, something that's going to be in the presence and it's receiving your puja, you're offering flowers to it with every mantra, or you're just focusing on it while you're chanting your mantra. And it's like a battery. And this battery is like storing the Shakti of your sadhana over time so that it becomes increasingly more powerful. And then what's happening is that this higher energy is activating the Kundalini. As you chant your mantra and as your mandala is gathering all this Shakti, all this energy, it's helping you to increase your energy as well. And as your energy comes up to over 100%, then the Kundalini activates. So we need to have this higher surge of Shakti in order for the Kundalini to awaken. And that's usually done through initiation from somebody else who has already unfolded that power. Because they're over here oscillating at 240 volts, and you're over here at 110, and they just give you a spark of their 240, and you can take that and you can become 240, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's by creating and putting up that fire, that inner fire.
Yes, exactly. And so yoga is helping you to be able to focus all of the energy at Muladhara and then in Sushumna. And we have the different practices, all the different bandhas and mudras for activating Muladhara and for activating the chakras. And then we have pranayams and breathing techniques, breathing meditations like a japa gayatri, like Soham meditation, which helps you to direct that Shakti through the spinal pathway. But again, this is all the path of will. This is all the path of yoga, which is more the masculine approach, which is more of the renunciate approach, which I think is not really what most people are looking for today. I think what most people are looking for today is more the path of surrender, more the feminine path of following your intuition, following your heart, and surrendering to this inner force, which is actually very, very, very intelligent. The Kundalini, as I have experienced it, is an intelligent force. And it knows if you're ready for her to awaken or not. And this is also why, Kundalini psychosis, although I've encountered a few examples of this, I don't really believe in it because it's not just some impersonal force that can go haywire. It's an intelligent force that is guiding the progress of your evolution. That's what Kundalini does. She is the energy guiding the progress of all evolution. What is the purpose for all of this? Evolution is guiding us back to being able to realize the universal while in an individual form. So then she is evolving a form of life so refined with such a delicate nervous system and with a big enough brain capacity that it can realize that it is the universe. The universe can realize itself embodied in physical form. And so she's guiding the whole progress of evolution already. Even right now, we talk about Kundalini activation and Kundalini awakening, but the Kundalini is already active right now. You couldn't exist otherwise. So it's more about, the tantric approach is learning how to be able to surrender to that, how to be able to increase that, how to build that up, how to conserve that energy. And as that energy becomes stronger and raises and becomes more intense, you have to surrender. You have to surrender your ego. You have to surrender your fear. You have to surrender your pride. You have to surrender your attachments. You have to surrender your false identifications. Eventually, everything has to be offered like a sacrifice to the fire of Shakti, as she helps you to be able to totally transcend all your limitations and to become something more than human. And it does definitely help to be able to have a guru and to be able to have a spiritual community, because you are going to totally transcend your current way of thinking. And so you have to let go of all of these lower mentalities, all these belief systems, and all of these cultural programmings, conditionings, social conditionings. We have to be able to totally shed all of these, like a snake sheds its skin in order to have a new skin. And in the process of doing that, you can sometimes feel like maybe you're going crazy. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm losing my mind.
Mhm.
Because you're letting go of these social programmings and conditionings, which are actually not fulfilling. And they're not really, a lot of these social conditionings, they're not meant to help you. They're meant to keep you limited. They're meant to keep you in line. They're not meant to really liberate you, unfortunately. There was a time when social conditionings in the Vedic era, they did lead to the ultimate liberation of the individual. But our modern social conditionings do not. Our modern social conditionings are more constructed to keep the masses dumbed down, to keep them passive, and to allow them to be easily manipulated and exploited. So we do need to have some kind of social circle, a spiritual community, a sangam of some sort, to be able to encourage us in our spiritual growth, to be able to inspire us in our spiritual growth, to see that there's others maybe who have already gone through what you're going through now, and they can not only inspire you, but they can encourage you, and also so that you can know that this is normal for what I'm doing. This might not be normal for worldly people. Worldly people are going to look at what I'm doing and they might be afraid of it. But for spiritual people who are on the spiritual path, what you're currently going through is actually normal. And especially on the Kundalini path, there's certain parts which are, some views are beautiful, and other times you're going through the swamps and through the valleys and through the deserts. And it helps to be able to know where you're at. For example, the three main goddesses of Tantric sadhana, Kali, Lakshmi, Saraswati, these represent the three stages of Kundalini awakening, where in the beginning, you're in the dimension of Kali, where your Kundalini has just recently awakened, and you have all these internal demons that need to be slaughtered. And that's what Kali is doing. She's the Shakti, destroying all the demons, slaughtering the ego. And that's why she's so fierce, and she has a garland of skulls. And in that beginning part of the initial Kundalini awakening is when you might have the most turbulence, is when you might have the most problems, because the purification that is starting there is, some of the more intense things are going to need to percolate up and come out to be released. And that's the way that they're released. They're released consciously somehow. You have to look at it. You have to face it. You have to either face it in meditation, or you have to face it in a dream. Oftentimes we dream in order to face whatever is in our psyche. But whatever we are repressing, we have to face it. And the Kundalini will bring that up to the surface of your being to be dealt with, to be faced, to be healed, and to be integrated and transcended. But it is a process that we should have a community for. And then the guru is ultimately meant to act as that inspiration. The guru inspires you through the most transformational stage and process of your life, where you are going through that Kundalini metamorphosis, a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. And you know, when a caterpillar is in the cocoon, it is some cells are committing suicide and some cells actually become the butterfly. And scientists actually call those cells that become the butterfly, they call them imaginable cells. That's actually what scientists call them, because it's as if they're able to imagine a new future as a butterfly. The other cells say, this is it, it's over, the caterpillar is done, the caterpillar is not going to continue, and they commit suicide. Whereas other cells, they imagine a future as a butterfly, and they become part of the metamorphosis of what becomes the butterfly. And so us too, when we are having that Kundalini unfolding, that Kundalini awakening, the whole process, we need something to focus on to help us to be able to imagine a new future as divine beings. And the guru is oftentimes what allows us to do that, because your guru is an actual person. It's a real person in your life. It's not a story about somebody who lived 2,000 years ago. It's not an ideal, a legend or something like this, a god that may or may not exist. No, it's a real person in your real life. And so they can inspire you, right? You can know that this is possible. And so you make them your focus during that phase. But afterwards, you don't need your guru. And this is how Tantra is different. And yoga, I would say as well, is different than most religions, because most religions, they want you to stay subservient. They want you to stay part of the coming back and tithing. And you know, they always want you to be part of their church, right? Well, in Tantra and yoga, ultimately, you transcend everything. You transcend the need for your guru. You transcend even your mantra. You transcend even Tantra and yoga eventually. You can let it all go eventually, because it's all just a means to an end, but it's not the end in itself. So we have these two paths of yoga and Tantra, and all of these have to do with Kundalini.
And thank you so much for the great lecture you gave. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. It has been a wonderful blessing